All right. Hey, everybody. It is Matt Aguito here for the third episode of Civil Conversations. This week we had to do it on a Thursday night due to scheduling conflict, but I'm excited to have this conversation because this one specifically is getting perspective from I was born in the 90s, people who were born in the 90s. And so I have Josiah Goodrum and Micaela Parson. You guys who have caught this series a couple times before know how it goes. The two of them actually do not know each other. They've never met before today. They met 15 minutes before the call, so that way we can get through some of the pleasantries and also how the show is going to go. I'm excited to talk to them. I mean, at the end of the day, we know that we're in a sensitive time right now, and when it comes to race and relations and culture and social justice in the U.S. Every day I feel like there's something new going on, but I think it's important to get the perspective of young adults. Especially because we sometimes want to say things have passed on or things are gone, or it's over now or it's in the past, and maybe it's not. Maybe it is. So anyway, so I want to give a couple people a few more seconds to jump on, and then we're going to jump into intros. I subscribe to a ladies first model, so we're going to have Micaela go first to introduce herself, give us a little bit of her background, and then followed by Josiah, and then we'll just continue jumping right on into this conversation and just getting a gauge on how are they basically today. So, yep, checking out the live real quick. All right, cool. So, Micaela Parson, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and a little bit of your background.
My name is Micaela Parson, as you said. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, Chesapeake County. Grew up playing basketball. Grew up around sports family, big church family. Ended up going to the Monacan High School. And then went to the University of Richmond, played basketball there all 4 years, had a biology degree, and then did a graduate program for like pre-medical students at the University of Pennsylvania. And so I just finished that this fall, and now I currently work for Penn Medicine as a researcher.
Oh, nice. Josiah.
I am Josiah Goodrum. I'm from Asheville, North Carolina, and I now live in Charlotte. I've been here for about 8 years. I came to UNC Charlotte, graduated in 2016, and I was born in 1994. Apparently, I'm a young adult. I did not realize that. I feel like I'm 65, so it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, you're
got on this call, but
you're definitely a young adult, I guess, in comparison to myself. And what year were you born, Micaela?
1996.
1996. Okay.
That's on the. I was born in the 90s. That's what we'll say.
Say it one more time.
So I was born in the 90s. That's what counts.
Yeah, that is what counts. And I think it's important because one of the unique parts. So for me, I graduated high school in '99. So I was. My first election that I voted in was Bush versus Gore. That probably is like completely make you guys feel like I'm old. And with everything that's been going on today, I have a perspective, right? So I spent my teenage high school years in the 90s. And so there was a lot that was going on there. But for you two specifically, one of the things I want to stress to everybody who's watching this is Josiah represents himself. He is one white young male, 26 years old, who has his own perspective on life, but he may just so happen to say things that connects with somebody out there. Micaela, young, Black, 23-year-old young lady, she has her own perspective as well, but there may be some people out there who can connect with her story as well. But the overall point here is to gain perspective and for these two to have a conversation with me and with each other to understand what it's been like for them with race and their history and their background. And what I think is awesome is just knowing that they came up in a much more digital age than most of us. The last two conversations we had, we were all, I think the youngest person was maybe 35 years old. So I'm excited to understand how you guys are doing and what's going on. So Micaela, why don't you go ahead and start, man? And how have you been with everything that's been going on, especially the last couple months, and all. Just, kind of go ahead and spitball it.
I mean, the last couple of months have definitely been a lot more eye-opening than it has in like the last few years. But I mean, just more recently, definitely being here in Philadelphia and like being away from my family has made this experience a little more terrifying. Just the fact of like, I have a brother at home who's, about to go to college. My dad is also at home, and I have, a bunch of friends and family back home who are Black and who live this on the daily life. And I mean, it's terrifying to know that this could happen to anyone that I know.
Yeah.
And that nothing is being done about it. Like you could say, if that was my family, then I would have a huge uproar about it. But it's scary, and that just one day this could happen, and for something very, very little, like simply just walking across the street, that this could happen. And trying to explain that to my brother, and I mean, he obviously knows, but just and coming from different background as some typical like stereotypical people would think Black people come from, it's a whole different light of knowing that your zip code won't save you, the house you live in won't save you.
That's facts.
Your job won't save you, your education won't save you. On the surface, you're Black, and that's all people see. So it's like, sure, you may be able to talk your way out of a ticket, or you may be able to do certain things that you can do, but most times it's not going to happen that way. And just because of the color of your skin, color of my skin. So, I mean, I have had to have difficult conversations with people who I treated like family, like teammates, friends. And again, it's like, this experience has been so eye-opening. It's just the fact of who've been silent. And not just silent, but, kind of complicit with the whole thing. Like, yeah, I'll post this picture, this and that. And, you get the text messages every single day, you get the, the reach outs, and that those are, nice, but it's like, it's not about me. It's not about fighting for someone that it's not about fighting for people that you grew up with. So it's like fighting for someone that you have no idea who they are. They're a human being. They may be Black, they may be white, they may be this. It's like, would you go, if you saw injustice being done, would you say something about it? And just the fact that, yeah, I do have people who I can say, yeah, this person would fight for this person would fight for me. And you have some people who have stayed quiet or think this is like a political issue, think this is not their place to say. And it's like, no, you should be upset. And it's sad to see people who aren't as upset as me or aren't as, affected, because it doesn't necessarily affect them.
Do you feel like, well, actually, let me hold off a little bit. That's really good insight. I mean, Josiah, how's this been impacting you, overall? I mean,
overall, it's been really tough, to be honest with you. It's been really hard to focus at work, just because I know there are certain things like work that I'm doing is not, I'm a content strategist, so it's not really groundbreaking. And I know that there's this massive issue in our country, and I'm like, it's hard to like type out words when my Black brothers and sisters are just suffering so much. And it's been tough mentally, to just go into work and know, like, this is so far from over, and it is so, like, how many people are just posting a black square because social media told them to do it. And like, cause I mean, yeah. So it's just been like thinking about that, and it's pretty tough.
Do you guys find that, with I think the thing that's interesting is that, I'm sure, like, some of us that are my age, pushing 40, are probably like, man, you don't want to look at somebody who's 10, 12, 13 years behind you dealing with some of the same things, white or Black, heck, Asian, Indian, whatever, right? But it happens, right? And I kind of, I don't want to say I worry, but I guess that's probably the best word I could use, is like, I worry about the fact that, like, okay, when is this going to stop? Like, what generation is this going to like eventually just cease with? So to your point earlier, Micaela, just about even some of the hard conversations you've had to have, you mind going a little bit deeper into some of your background, and how you grew up, and how like why those conversations may have been difficult, especially because of some of your background a little bit?
Yeah. So as I said, I'm from Richmond, and I started my education going to like a primarily Black private school down in Southside Richmond. And so there, I mean, I don't think I necessarily felt the implications of what's happening now, just because I was surrounded by, my Black peers, my Black brothers and sisters. Like, I didn't really know anything different at the time. It wasn't until I transferred schools, around like elementary school, where I went to a primarily white elementary school, and I definitely saw how different it was. And I think that's when the microaggressions start, but you don't necessarily recognize their microaggressions at the time. So like, you get the, oh, you're not really Black, you don't talk Black, or you don't sound Black, or, you're not like that Black person.
But you really still heard that even in the 2000s?
Yeah. And I mean, it's not just the white people who were saying this, it's like the Black people too. So it was kind of like, it fed into it. But I think from a very early age, you learn there's a difference between what people want me to be and then who I actually am. Mm-hmm. And you feed into that category where you're just like, what does not being like, what is this? What are they saying that I'm not? Or like, what are they saying I'm sound like? And then you very early on, you learn like what code switching is. And you everyone has that moment where, they know what their parents sound like on the phone, but then, well, when I call my mom from a random phone number, you get the, hello, this is so-and-so. Two different. So very early on, you learn what a Black person's supposed to sound like, what a white person's supposed to sound like.
Right.
Going into middle school and high school, I'm kind of just like, why is this? Because I sound like I have an education, I sound like I'm this. And that to me is just kind of.
You could just say it, just like you sound white.
You sound white. And you're just like, what does that mean?
But isn't it kind of wild that like, and Josiah, I hope this doesn't offend you at all, but it's wild that sounding white is the default for sounding intelligent.
Yeah. Oh, you're very eloquent for this, so you do this.
And it's like, wow, like, why can't I just be an eloquent, intelligent man or woman, no matter what my skin color is, or, or I shouldn't default that to a white person, I'm sorry, go ahead, Micaela.
It became more apparent, like, as I said, when I was in elementary school, and I started playing AAU basketball. And so at the time I was like on an all Black team, and I think we were playing, certain few teams. And then one of the games we had to end early, and we were like, why did we end early? And it was like, the team got, this qualified player said the N-word, like calling our team. And so we were kind of like, they said, what?
What year was this?
Fourth grade. So let's see, I was about 9. So.
So 05 time frame.
05 was, it was 6. Yeah, and so things
I'm
like
looking
that.
at Josiah, he's like, he's freaking out over there, man.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a thing that like happened, and we just had to roll with the punches, and we're just like, okay, like people still do this. Like I thought, this isn't Huckleberry Finn. Like I thought this is like had been, washed over. Like people don't talk like this anymore. And then going into college was like a whole different, coming from a more diverse high school, going into the University of Richmond, which is, a very conservative white school. You got the what's it called? Lily Pulitzer dresses, the boat shoes, that type of like environment. And I mean, it was very quick to see that I was like, okay, this is very different. Like I'm going to stick out here. And like from right off the bat, like I said, I played basketball. You're seen there as like, the stereotypical like athlete, black athlete. Like you're only here because you played this sport. And you're like, my grades were decent. Like it's not about that. But just like the eye-opening things that have happened, like I think I was like in my sophomore year when Colin Kaepernick kneeled. And that whole thing to me, like as an athlete, as a Black athlete, I was like, yeah, like he's doing the right thing. This makes a lot of sense to me. I have a lot of passion for this. And so when the time came, when the coaches were like, do you guys want to do this? I look back on it now, I'm like, I wish I would have, rallied people behind this to get into this point. But my idea was like, no, we can't do it because not everyone's going to want to do it.
Yeah.
And I never asked myself why. Like, why didn't you, challenge people on this? Why didn't you do this? And it's just because I felt like, being Black, that would have like implications on, like the team would be seen as this, and like it would have a lot of,
Well, if you don't mind, and Josiah, please comment, because your brain looks like you're going 100 miles an hour listening to her too. Like the part that's interesting that I don't think I've ever really thought about is, even when I wanted to have this conversation, which I'm so happy now we're having this conversation, is how old you guys were when Colin Kaepernick kneeled. To put it in perspective, I was well in my 30s at that point, right? So
it wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't. But the fact that you were a sophomore when that happened, is crazy, because you're a basketball player, you're Black, you're at a predominantly white college, you believe in what Colin Kaepernick is saying, and you're now carrying the weight of what he believes in and what you believe in, but you can't do anything about it because of the image that you carry. Like, did that sum that up in the right way? And you're 20 years old at the time, so I'm kind of like, how do you do that? Josiah, what do you think about that, man? And
yeah, I mean,
also, if you don't mind, just go into your past too after you respond to everything Micaela just said, man.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I was just out of college. I remember it happening. I was working at an advertising agency, and I remember thinking, like, why are white people specifically so mad at this? I didn't understand. From my point of view, it's like, yo, like he's doing something that he believes in, which is like the most American thing you can do, right? Like, stand up for what you believe, right? Like, that's kind of, so, the whole thing was just, I just, at the time, I would consider myself apolitical. I didn't want to engage in any type of political conversation. So I knew what he was doing was the right thing to do, but I wasn't going to say, oh yeah, he should be doing it, or he shouldn't be doing it. I was just like, this doesn't really affect me. It's really sad that people are so mad at this. But at the time I was just like, yeah, I can't do anything about it. So what does my voice have anything like what am I going to contribute to the conversation? Essentially, it's like
right.
Because some people are like, we're going to boycott the NFL, and I'm like, well, I mean, football is cool though. Like, I don't know, like why at the time the Panthers were good. That now I have different feelings. But a little bit like, so I grew up in the whitest place of all time, Asheville, North Carolina.
I saw a Black guy there one time. I looked in the mirror when I was in Asheville.
Like seeing a unicorn. It's like it was. So I mean,
just kidding. There's plenty of Black people in Asheville, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I grew up homeschooled. Like I had my limited interaction with Black people was in I played basketball too, which is that's kind of how I met my first Black person. Right. And and that was like at the time I didn't think that racism exists. I was a kid. Like I didn't have people saying the N-word at a basketball game. I didn't I wasn't privy to that. So I grew up very Christian conservative, very Republican, very my dad, I love my dad, but he listened to Rush Limbaugh pretty much every day. So I mean that's just where I come from. And I have since, I think, going back to how recent events have impacted me the most is, I would say, whereas before I was apolitical, now I'm realizing I have to figure out a way. I'm a believer, I'm a Christian. I have to figure out a way to bring in the gospel to politics, even though I hate it. because that's really the only way that this is going to change, right? Through that kind of thing, is figuring out how we can actually bring about justice and actually bring about equity. Because I mean, it's stop me when I'll talk
No, I
forever.
think I'm like, I love everything you're saying. I think there's this fight. So, you know, from a our backgrounds really do dictate a lot of why we do and live the way we live, right? So I'm listening to both of you and I'm kind of like, wow, like you guys ended up in specific weird places in regards to where you stand, either because of your, you know, extreme conservative views or the athletic star you are, and you have a phenomenal setup right now at U of R. You don't want to risk that. And to be honest with you, I subscribe to like whatever's past is past. You made the right decision, as long as you definitely learn from it and you move forward, right? Because I mean that's really pretty much it, right? When you think about it, when it comes to and I don't think we can really unpack this today, but like when it comes to the church and the gospel and Christianity in this conversation, not this conversation, but in the overall conversation, it becomes very difficult because of the definition of what Christianity is supposed to be in regards to our life or politics, right? Like, and I say or, not and, in some cases, because I feel like I don't think that they're exactly the same. It's just difficult because you can have somebody have the same Bible and completely have an entirely different view of what they think the implications are. So, you know, it's tough, you know. So for you guys, like, do you feel like at this, like right now, like today, like what are the things, because you mentioned that you were political before, and then like Micaela, you thinking about the stuff that you wish you would have done, and I guess this is more for you, Micaela, like for now, or turn to you right now, it's like, what is the stuff that you want to do now that you learned from the past that you didn't do, that you're trying to be involved in now to help make a change?
I mean, like I like what you said about, you know, our backgrounds do dictate about, you know, how we are as people, how we are as this. And I think a lot of that comes from people listening to their parents' belief and listen to, you know, things they see on Facebook and things they hear from other people to dictate how they're going to navigate through life. You know, this is right, this is right. I mean, this is that. But just in this day and time, I feel like people who, you know, stray away from different topics, difficult topics, are like just trying to avoid it head on. Like politics are one thing. You can educate yourself on politics, and you know, you can find your way through it, and you can determine, you know, who you are within the spectrum of politics. But right now, I don't think this is necessarily a political issue. Whether you're a conservative or liberal doesn't matter in this time. It's like you see something being done that's just inhumane. Essentially, you have to come down to a human perspective and see that this isn't right.
Yeah.
Like who you vote for and what you believe as far as politics shouldn't dictate how you see issues like George Floyd being murdered. That's more of, I feel like it's a safety net for people who don't want to touch on this topic. And it's such a large, it's how we're moving through life right now. Like, you know, obviously there's a huge pandemic, but it's like, we need to have these riots. We need to have people doing more. And I feel like just educating yourself on just more than who you're going to vote for. This is like, why is this happened several times, several years? Just, you know, it stems from off the back of this whole system we have. It's systemic. And so when you put it in perspective of like that, it's like, yeah, this happens. If we don't keep talking about it, it's going to die down. Like I remember going to a protest sophomore year. Same thing. I can't necessarily remember what it's about because we stopped talking about it. If we stop talking about the situations happening now, it's just going to die down, be swept on the rug, and then it's probably going to happen again just because nothing is being done. And so as far as, you know, what I'm trying to do is like,
that's true.
One, I personally, as a Black woman, I don't have all the answers. I know I'm suffering. I know my Black brothers and sisters are suffering. I know people who are, at the protests every day, at these riots every day. They're suffering, they're hurting, they're like, inside, on the surface, whether you're not or not. But it's like, you don't necessarily have to, you don't have to be on the front lines to be able to make a change in this. I feel like it's just about getting the word out, not stop talking about it, donate what you can donate. It's just education at this point, because at this point, if someone isn't, you're purposely ignoring it if you're not like choosing to see it, because it's like it's everywhere.
I think you touched on so much that is so valuable. And Josiah, please, jump in and ask questions too, but or make comments. But I think the politics are important because, we want people to get out and vote. However, the politics is not what we should lean on to do the right thing. And I think that's your point, right? And it's like, I made this post a little while ago about how, people no longer create parties. The party now creates people. And so you have a stance. I'm a middleman, real heavy middleman, more than what I think most people think. I think liberals think I'm conservative and conservatives think I'm liberal. But I think part of the reason why I've done that is that I feel like people just want to put you in a box for just looking at something the right way and just saying like, this is wrong. And being able to weigh it out. But also another thing you said is about talking about it. I think, my opinion, and I think, this is just me, but I think the media, you go all the way back to Rodney King, which happened before you guys were born. I remember when it happened, and I remember being little. I think I was like 11 years old when it happened, 10 or 11. And I was like, oh yeah, these cops are going to jail. They didn't, or they didn't get convicted or something like that. And I fast forward, I'm like, you're sort of right, Micaela. Like, I think the conversation that happened, but when I think about the media, I think the media has stolen the ability for African Americans and whites, specifically in this country. I know there are other races, and other races should talk, but these two specifically, from having one-on-one conversations, which is why I started this too, right? To be able to have conversations with people in their sphere, so it's not just the media throwing something at you and making you feel like it's just that. Because some of these situations that's occurred, the reason why they're so traumatic to Black people, and Josiah, I don't know if anyone's ever told you this specifically, is that the incidents that may have occurred to us as individuals that didn't result in death, it reminds us of that trauma, right? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So it's just the way it happened. It's like, whoa, like, y'all feel me? Go ahead, Josiah. I'm sorry. You said, like you about to say something or either you about to preach.
No, I mean, I was, do you know JB and Melinda Bell?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they have a counseling center. They're doing a series on Mondays. I'll give a quick shout out to I think it's C4 Counseling. They're doing Zoom calls. And the first one in June was about that racial trauma and just kind of how it manifests itself in the body, and that is all too real. And I'm an Enneagram type 4, so I'm a touchy-feely guy. If you try to come at me with like stats and stuff, I'm like, I get out of here. This doesn't mean anything to me because I'm feeling a certain way. And so I think, I just knowing how there's certain things that I get stressed out about for really no reason. I can only imagine how stressful it would be to actually have a grounded reason to be stressed out. And that was one of the questions that I had for you guys and you, Micaela, is, how are you keeping your sanity? How are you mentally keep taking care of yourself to not let it get to you? Because I mean, I'll have a bad day at work and I'm like all stressed out, and it's like, this is just amplified by so many more levels. So I'm just, what have you been doing to help keep your sanity and keep?
That's a good question.
You got it? Or we need to go first?
No, the question's to you.
Yeah, it's to you.
It's to both of us. Okay. Well, I think I'm in a pretty unique situation right now in that I have a lot of things going on as far as, trying to study for, the specific test I'm taking. And then I just moved into a new apartment. So I've had things to keep me busy, which have helped a lot. But it's also, I think it's just living. I mean, it's a state of uncomfortable. Like, I think it's good to be uncomfortable right now. And so I'm not necessarily freaking out. Like, obviously I'm terrified and scared that, this is a much larger issue it's just started, which is a good thing. And also it's like a bad thing as far as, we still have a lot to go through and a lot to work through. But I think I'm just keeping busy right now. And it's good to be surrounded by people here who love me, and people, I have friends here. So it's like, they reach out, they do this, like, hey, checking in on yourself, doing this. And sometimes, as far as taking care of myself, I just have to get off social media. Mm-hmm. It like, the media controls everything right now. And yes, that it's good that people are posting all these things, and, we're not silent at all. It's just sometimes the trauma of, media is just so, it really does affect your soul. So sometimes I'm just like, I can't handle that today. I need to focus on this. Because I know if I see something that will trigger me, it's like, that'll ruin my whole day. And I can't fathom that. So
yeah, I feel you. I think for me, just to kind of quickly answer that same question, is definitely media. But it's funny now, social media has to fall into that, right? When you have like these clickbaits and all this other stuff, and we take some of these terms and create a quick meme and throw it on a meme, and then boom, like it's all there. Trying to shield yourself from it for a while is very helpful. Staying busy does help. I saw this meme though, and I'm talking about memes, but I saw this meme. It was like a guy, it was a black guy with his head back. I think it was Tupac or something like that. And it said, man, George Floyd gets killed. I'm carrying all this black trauma, and I got to log in today, or something like that. And I was like, wow, and it's hard, that Friday, I'll just say it here. I mean, that Friday when it all happened, my boss, white female, she's awesome. She literally picks up the phone. I'm thinking we're going through work and, for work or whatever. And she just said, hey man, this thing that happened in Minnesota, how are you doing? And I just broke down crying. It was like 4 days later. And it was the first time I expressed it. So the fact that somebody white just opened up and let me just kind of like express how I felt was huge, because it's where I spend most of my time. Right. So Micaela, you're doing your thing. You're working. Josiah, you're working. I'm working, but it's where we spend most of our time. So knowing that somebody can allow us to express ourselves where we spend most of our time is helpful, because you got to put it away. Does Micaela and my perspective kind of help you, Josiah, a bit?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how I would handle it. Like, and I think that's kind of the thing is for me, that I've been really trying to put myself in a black person's shoes and think about what I would be like and what I would feel like. And I mean, it got to me. I mean, there's a point in time, and I'll try not to cry, but I mean, sorry.
It's all right, dude. Like, I mean, that's.
I told you I'm an emotional guy.
No, it's cool, man.
But after that, I mean, it's evil, and I don't know how I would make it. Like, I don't know, because for me to think about it and to think about just the monstrosity of it all and how deep this is embedded. I mean, I broke down for about a week every morning. And, like the conviction of, well, like, and going back to the political thing is like, I know it's not political. I know it's human. But I do have that white privilege, and I do have a responsibility, to not sit on the sidelines like I've been doing for so long, because, like, that's something that I have been convicted of, is just not taking any actual actions. Like, it's one thing to get educated. It's one thing to understand systematic racism, but like, it's going to keep happening unless we start having those hard conversations.
Yeah.
Unless we start and recognizing like, yo, like, this doesn't matter you're right, what side of the aisle you're on. Like, I think the whole two-party thing is so BS. Like, how can you not see, how can you just look at this and like, oh, it's people trying to garner up votes for an election? Like, no, this guy was, sorry, I'm trying to censor myself. This guy was murdered, right? Like, he was murdered.
No, that's fine.
And how can you change that conversation to be about politics? Like, how can you change that conversation to be like, well, not all cops are this way? It's like, come on. Like, why are you, how can you watch this video as a white person and think like there's not a problem? I
think some of it goes back to, it's about exposure, right? So I'm going to give a little grace, right? Some of it is about exposure. It's about not, if you operate in what you know, then that's what you know. Like, politics is an easy conversation to have. It's an educational conversation in some cases. It's not personal, right? And when people, and I'm not making excuses, I just think that people respond with what they're comfortable with, and unfortunately, we have become too comfortable with the politics in the U.S., right? If that makes any sense. It's tough. But let me ask you a question, because there's a couple comments that's come in, and I know we're about that time where we're going to start taking on some comments. Okay. And for some reason, my phone's not allowing me to see this one, but I'm going to ask it. It was from Nikki, and I'm probably am not going to say the question correctly, primarily because I can't read it the right way, because I can't find it now. It's asking Josiah, what is your views? This is good. This is a little touchy, so I'll manage this one. What are basically your views on white privilege? And, what do you believe in the concept of white privilege? I think that's how it was worded. I'm sorry, Nikki, if I didn't say that correctly, but
yeah, I mean,
and again, speaking as a 26-year-old,
yeah, this is my personal experience with it. Kind of going rewinding to that Colin Kaepernick situation.
Right. And by the way, if everyone see me looking down, it's me trying to catch up with comments. So go ahead.
2016, that's when Keith Lamont Scott was shot in Charlotte. He was killed by the police. It was in that same, there was other police killings, I think, in that same time frame. I can't remember exactly, but I remember reading an article about some article on the internet, like, I checked my white privilege for a day, and I to be honest with you, I was like, well, I'm not privileged. I worked hard for this job. I struggled through managerial economics, like so what are you saying? I don't work hard? Like, what do you, and I kind of bristled at it, right? And it was fast forward a couple of years, we planted a church on the west side. Shout out to West Charlotte Church. And I started a book club. It didn't last for very long, but we read a bunch of books, and one of them was, it's a really long title, but Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting at the Cafeteria by Themselves, or something along those lines. I probably messed that up. But it kind of like, it illuminated what that phrase meant. And we talked about it this morning, Matt, like, maybe privilege isn't, maybe it has wrong connotations. But if you take time to actually dig into what people mean by that, it doesn't discount what you've achieved, right? It doesn't discount my achievements. It just is recognizing, hey, I have had significant advantages. For instance, when I go to the grocery store, I don't think twice. I don't think twice about someone following me around. When I get pulled over, I do not fear for my life. Never have I ever. Like, that's not something I worry about. And so when we talk about white privilege, I think I'm a Christian, and so I can't speak for non-believers, but my faith allows me to take a step back and just listen, because it's when you are unable to listen to your brothers and sisters in Christ that are Black, and they're telling you this is a thing, and you're like, nah, you're discounting. You're not listening. You're not loving your neighbor. And I talked earlier with Matt, and in Corinthians, the famous love chapter that they read for all, like, before you get married, love is kind, love is patient, whatever. In there, it's, love believes all things.
Right.
So in this country, supposedly, you are innocent until proven guilty, right? And so, like, you have to take people, you have to believe people. And there's so many, I see so many people, like, not just shutting up and listening.
Yeah. So what do you think, Micaela? Like, how do you, and I didn't think we would actually touch this, the fact that we are a little bit, but what do you think about this topic, this area, and how's it impacted you? I mean, has it?
I mean, yeah, just going off what Josiah said, I think I saw a few things on social media. One was that, you don't have to walk in someone else's shoes to believe them. And so if several people are telling you this is happening, obviously you need to, like, shift your thinking to maybe this is happening. And then the other thing, just about, it's one of those things where, let's say you have a cousin, and if you want the cousin to spend the night, it's like, hey, like, you have to ask my mom for me. It's like the same thing of, like, enough Black people are talking about it, but it's like, we aren't the people who are actually going to formulate this change. It's like, it has to come from your cousin or your white brother and sister, who's going to have to ask, the overseer, like, that's the change that needs to happen. So, I mean, as far as, what Josiah said, going into the store, I do fear sometimes. I'm like, probably, like, I walk into a store and I don't buy anything. I'm like, dang, they're going to think I took something. And it happens every time. Just like, I try to casually walk out, and I stop just to make sure, maybe if someone was stealing, it wouldn't just stop at the door. I stop at the door, and I'm like, okay, now I can walk out, because they know who would stop and rob the store. But
Right.
Yeah, things like that. And then just getting pulled over. I've seen my mom, the one time she probably got pulled over because, her driving record is perfect. But the one time she had her hand on the wheel and she talked the officer. I mean, it does probably come from, being a lawyer, but just her being like, hey, officer, I'm going to reach and down and get, my registration. This is what's happening. And so just watching her do that, I'm like, Mom, like, you're overreacting. But then thinking about it, like, no, she's taking the proper precautions, because, anything could happen. It may be nighttime. They may not see what she's doing. Just, it's, at this point, it's better to be over dramatic than to, have something go wrong in one moment, and then, without a mother, like, just things like that. And I just times like this, I have to double think. And, I'm thankful that nothing has personally affected my family as far as losing a family member. Definitely having friends who've lost family members, lost brothers, just to, like, senseless things as far as, reaching for a hairbrush or just walking on the wrong side of the street. When I walk in a neighborhood, sometimes I take my hood off just to, it could be raining, but I'm taking my hood off just because I don't sense that things could go well in that scenario.
Yeah, it's an inconvenience. And I think, like, again, I'm hosting, hopefully, a more focused conversation on this, let's say, title of white privilege. I think sharing perspectives of the things that Black people think about, and that white people don't, is a safer way to kind of describe why the privilege terminology even exists, right? So privilege, whenever you put that up, like white privilege, Black on Black crime, heck, now it's defund the police. These things automatically put up a wall, right? And it's like, it's the defense, like you shared that, Josiah, earlier, where you're like, what do you mean? Like, you kind of felt some type of way. But there are some things in life that we just think about that we know that other races don't necessarily think about. So, like, I'll tell you, I may have said this on one of my other talks, but I didn't wear a mask when I went out for the first, like, month or so. I'm 5'11". Well, in shoes, I'm 6 feet tall, 220-pound, muscled up Black guy with a mask on walking into the store. That's what was in my head. So even if everyone else was doing it, that's what was in my head. I'll admit, like, it was. And so I finally decided to kind of cave in when I went into like the post office and realized I was like the only guy in 10 people that didn't have a mask on. So I felt weird. And I finally kind of let that go. I was like, I need to calm down. Like, not everyone's going to see me as a criminal. But, you know, my past, you know, kind of dictated my decision to not put on a mask for a while. Right. And also I want to give credence to a little bit of media. Right. I mean, that can have an impact on the way I view myself as well. And it's unfortunate. How do you guys feel about the fact that at your age, this is going on, and then you take the younger people, right? You know, let's take my age of 39, and we'll go ahead and subtract. So that would make me 13 years older than you, Josiah, and 15 years. Is that right? Almost 15. Your birthday's coming up.
Yeah.
Years older than you, Micaela. You know, you think about the same amount of years backwards, right? So now you're talking about, let's say, the 9-year-old Micaela for you, and the 13-year-old for you, Josiah. Like, how do we help? You know, how do we help this? Like, you know, the kid's born just 10 to 15 years ago. Anybody can take that. I mean, what do you guys think?
You're saying as of now?
Yeah, like now, like how do we help?
I mean, like just being older now, like if I was 9, I feel like you would feel helpless. And even now, sometimes I do feel helpless because it's like a collective body that needs to assemble for, you know, change to be done. But I think a difference that I see between, you know, a few years ago when we had, you know, another police murder, but until now, is that I feel like something is changed within our community, which is like the ball is rolling, and like we're rolling in the right direction, and it's like slowly but surely moving, and like people aren't silent about this. Like, we're obviously not, this isn't going away for a while. You know, you have the statues coming down, and like the Virginia, I know Maryland, I think had a few, but like statues are coming down now. We've been trying to get that down for like years now. I remember seeing those when I was, you know, a kid going on field trips to see Robert E. Lee, and you're like, but just things like that. And, you know, you still have, you know, the Lynch.
Can I pause you there? Like, I just, that's wild. So yeah. We perpetuated an education of a Confederate leader. And here you are, a Black student at whatever age, going to go check out the great Robert E. Lee.
Right. They're like, he was a leader and he was this. You're like, he's basically U.S. Hitler. Like, but we're not associating the two. And then like the same thing with Georgetown, and the same thing, you know, we're having like a movement. That's it actually does feel like a movement at this point, because, you know, this has been going on for, feels like centuries. But just the fact that things are actually starting to slowly change. People are being more adamant about what they do, how they're doing it, using their platforms for good. It's just, you know, you have people who coming together who weren't coming together before, and just to get points across. So it's like, I feel like what we can do, you know, as young adults, as adults, it's just, we need to, well, one, make sure that this history doesn't repeat itself, because it's been doing that for years now. And it's like, when is that whole pattern going to change? But just the fact that we're moving in the right direction now, like we're not falling back on things we've promised, things we said. People have had enough. So I just think we just need to say, moving towards this right direction.
Josiah, what do you think? I'm just looking at comments.
Yeah, I think that's everything Micaela says, right? I you know, I think some perspective is helpful to realize, like, we're really not that far removed from all this stuff. Like, I follow Christian rapper Propaganda. He's awesome. And, you know, he posted, he's interracially married. His wife is Latina. And, you know, he was talking about, like, 53 years ago, his marriage would have been illegal. Like that's nuts. Like 50, it's not that long ago. Like my you know, my parents were alive when, you know, my parents were bused into schools, right? Like there was like that was the end of segregation, right? We're not that far removed. And I think for me, I think we talked about it earlier, but for white people specifically, I think it's exposure. I think that it took a global pandemic, who knew, to get white people to open up their eyes to like, whoa, this is a huge problem. Because if you're in your bubble, like take me, for instance, I was in my little white homeschool bubble, didn't really have any black friends, although I wanted them. I played basketball, so I was like, I wanted black friends, whatever. Okay, whatever. But I was in this bubble, and I'll be straight up with you. Like, I was homeschooled, so my curriculum was not the Civil War. I mean, we referred to it as the War of Northern Aggression. Like, that's what I grew up with. I mean, I'm not holding any punches. Like, if mom and dad are watching, I mean, sorry, but this is my reality. And it wasn't until I was exposed to Black people and just like having conversations and reading books and just talking and just having conversations with people that I was like, dang, this is a real issue. Like, white supremacy, like, before I was like, I don't, America, you can do whatever you want. You can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But the reality is that's not the case. And so for Black people. And so I think it's important to continue to expose white people specifically, because there's some tweet going around like this is a white person problem. And that's true. It is true. Like, we are the ones perpetuating the system. And, of course, you're not going to say the system is broken if the system works for you, because it's not broken for you, And so exposure. As believers, if you go to church and everyone looks like you, you're doing it wrong. That should not be the case. You need to be around people that do not look like you, that aren't the same age, that have different backgrounds, that have different viewpoints. And the only thing that you really need is Jesus. I'm sorry, that's really corny and cheesy, but it's true. I mean,
it's not corny and cheesy, man. You're being you, man.
It's a matter of like looking at the gospel and realizing that it is for everyone. It is for everyone. And if you can't see this problem, like, check your heart, like, see where Jesus. I've been reading through the Gospels for the past couple months, and I've made it a point in June to kind of like take a bit of what I'm reading about Jesus and what he did. And he is not with the majority culture. Like, he's not with the moral people. The people that claim to have the morality, the people that claim to be this or that, are the ones that he is like, you're wrong. And so I see a lot of that in the Christian church. I see a lot of people that claim to be Christians and can't see this issue.
Yeah. And so I want to jump on that. So and I'm going to also jump into a couple of comments. I think you're 100% right. And I think where both of you guys are touching on is education and the heart, right? On both sides, right? Like, the exposure, education, and the heart. And what does that all look like? Because I will say, we all know the beliefs are similar, especially between these three, us three right now. But I don't want to say when you simplify it, but when you bring it down to those areas, however way that looks, it becomes one of those things where, like, where's your mind and heart at in place of the lack of education that you may have and knowledge you may have? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, it goes back to what you said earlier. It's like my faith should at least allow me to listen. So even if you don't have the education, you should at least listen. Mm-hmm. I want to say this very carefully, this next statement very carefully, especially because everybody that's probably even viewing. For those that are not Christians and anti-Christian on top of that, in some cases, I truly believe, and I know that some of my fellow Christians are probably going to disagree with me here. I truly believe they still can have a heart to want to learn and listen and change. You see what I'm saying? That's not to say anything that you said, Josiah, anything you said, Micaela, is wrong. It's more of like, you know what I mean? Just because of the two sides of that. And it's like, because I don't ever want to feel like it's a hopeless thing. Like, hey, get saved and you'll understand this racism issue. Because the truth of the matter is, guess what? Those who are quote unquote saved can also be racist.
Well,
So
yeah, and that's what I'm saying is like, you know, it's God, this is probably what I've
right.
wept
So
over the most is the fact that like I know people that like are in the church and cannot see this as a problem, and I have people that I know for a fact are anti-Christian, do not want God in their lives whatsoever. They can see this as an issue, and so it's like, whoa, how are we not getting this? How as believers, if we believe the gospel, what the gospel actually means, how are we letting this? How are we not seeing this?
yeah, I'm with you. So Micaela, quick question: what are your thoughts on some of what we just discussed? And I'm about to pull up a comment in a second, but go ahead.
As far as
just from well, obviously you talked about the education and we talked about the as believers and its impact, and then also the church, right? You know, how do you feel about that, even where you are right now in life and the things you're working on? Because you're working on things, if you don't mind jumping into that, that's really kind of church agnostic too, right?
As far as
meaning it's not church agnostic, but basically it's out. I don't know. You tell me, what's the thing you started actually doing? You shared it with me earlier. With I think it's in Chesterfield or something, or
oh yeah, my sister and a few other alumni from Chesterfield County actually put together like a call to action letter, just as far as, you know, just trying to get Chesterfield County to basically take action on their statement that they said. You know, like I feel like a lot of corporations and companies put out a lot of statements of like a very vanilla statement of like, yeah, we see what's going on and we stand with you. And like this, rah, rah, rah. But there's no action behind it. And like people say, like, you can apologize, but when you don't see change behavior or even like a step in a different direction, it means nothing. And yet, thank you for standing with us. It's just, you know, you need to do something behind it. And so what we felt as like alumni is that we were there are a lot of gaps in our education that could be filled. And I mean, we had a discussion about it today, but there's a lot of, you know, things that go behind it. So it's a lot more than just, you know, changing the curriculum. It's not a lot more than having like more diversity. It's a lot more than having specific resources for students of color. And so just going off that, I think it's like you said, how can we do to help? And I think it's looking back, you know, we've already passed the age where, you know, we're not in elementary school, we're not in middle school, we're not in high school anymore, but there are students still there. And, you know, eventually just having children go through that process as well, it's like you want them to be educated where we were lacking at one point.
Yeah, I will say, therefore, go ahead.
So it won't happen again.
Yeah, so it won't happen again. And I'll even throw myself on the firing, I guess on the firing pit or spit or whatever it is. I don't know. So Mike Welker made a comment. I think he was correcting me, and this goes back to either education or excitement or whatever. He said he was a general in the Confederacy, not the leader of the Confederacy. I think I actually accidentally said that. So thanks, Mike, for correcting me. But again, that goes back to the more, and again, speaking of ourselves, the more educated maybe to some degree we may become, the better we can speak on certain things. And I mean, I knew he was a general and all that stuff, but my point is, like, I think sometimes we can forget or not even know, speak from a place of not fully understanding. And when we move into this specific area of race, we pull in our feelings and our emotions into some things that may or may not be necessarily, not pull in, we put out things that may or may not be actually accurate. But I think as we grow in like our proximity of communication, some of the things you're working on, Micaela, when it comes to helping people get educated, getting exposure, utilizing the gospel to help grow our hearts to be willing to hear things. Those who are not believers, at the same time, being able to just be open and listening. Again, I want to stress, I understand our faith, but also that's people as humans, we should just listen and care and be able to hear others' perspectives. I mean, they're going in on this, on the comments here on education. I think it's funny. Not education, yeah, education and history and things like that. But I think it's important to be able to understand where all that lies, especially like listening to you guys when you're in your 20s. I'm kind of like, man, like, the fact that like I was saying something about lack of education when I was as a kid, and then you guys are saying the same thing now. You know, are my kids going to have, well, actually they won't be. But it's like this generation, are they going to have the same problem? How do we stop it right now? Like, how do we make sure our kids don't run into this again? You know, I'm sorry if I was just like going, there's just so much with this. Sorry, Josiah, what were you about to say? You about to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to the how do we continue to progress? And I think it is talking to kids. Like, I think it's being real with kids about our past, about what is going on. And, you know, like, I think that's probably one of my biggest responsibilities is that my kids grow up and they have exposure to Black people, and they have the knowledge of, this is what happened. We enslaved this people group, and this is not okay, and this is how it's happened. So, and I mean, so yeah, I think it's just having those conversations early. I think, especially for white people, because I've seen so many things about like the talk for Black people is like, hey, you know what? When you get pulled over, do this, don't do this, that kind of thing. And so white people need to have that conversation too. Like, this is what's going on, like to your kids. Because like Micaela was talking, like 9 years old, someone's shouting the N-word, like and that was in what?
Where did they learn that? Right? Yeah,
that was early 2000s, right? Like, man.
I got friends now who are my age. Their kids have been called that, and they're the same age now. I'm not talking about in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, and it's unfortunate. You know, it's highly unfortunate. I think. Let me see what time it is. Okay, we got about 3 to 5 minutes left. But I think we're at a point where, you know, when we say this has to stop now, at least what I'm gathering from listening to you guys, I think there's a start, because I think stopping is going to be hard. Like, racism has to stop now. I think we need to start doing more to help with it, because it's going to be hard to stop racism, especially because racism in the U.S., though defined as whites against Blacks, racism is something, and I know some people think it's controversial, racism is across the board. It happens. I was on a call with some Africans a couple of days ago within my organization. They talk about racism within their own country. So it happens. But in the context of the U.S. Right now, you know, we need to educate as quick as we possibly can for the kids of tomorrow who will eventually go be adults tomorrow, right? And, you know, I think this is said in a comment, I mean, around Jim Crow and things like that. I mean, we're not that far removed. Josiah, you said that. And I think even Micaela, you touched it. We're not that far removed. We're not, right? I mean, if you think about when Jim Crow ended in, I think it was 1965, I believe, and not everything got really implemented, you know, for another 5 to 7 years. You're talking, if you take 1965, that was 55 years ago. There are probably people right now watching this thread that are over 55 years old.
Yeah.
Which means that they may have walked past a whites only location or a blacks, like, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, man. There's a lot. I'm sorry, Micaela, you want to say something real quick before we close out?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. So any thoughts, Micaela, I'll give you the first dibs. Any thoughts or comments or anything you want to share with those who have been listening, or for Josiah and myself? Actually, I'll ask you this question. How can we as men, white and Black, support you as a young Black woman in America? Maybe that's a question you can answer.
Oh, boy.
I know it's a deep one. I'll give you a couple seconds to answer. And she doesn't speak for every Black woman, but she is a.
Every Black woman. But I mean, there's a different, the different realm of what happens when you're Black, but also you're a woman. You have to worry about, you may have the racial implications of, walking into a store being followed, but then you also have the fear of like, turning down a man and fearing for your life in that sense of like, he's a Black man. He also is one thing, but I think it's, again, one, education, and coming just from my perspective is like, there's a thing where like Black men and like white women have a thing where, you can be the oppressed, but also the oppressor. So it's like, pick one. And hopefully it's like, don't oppress me, do this whole thing. But it's hard for Black women, definitely, because we feel like we're at the bottom of the totem pole just because of that. You have the Black, but then you also have the women label attached with you as well. So it's like you're fearing for your life in so many different categories. Whereas like the thing that you guys can do is just, kind of support your Black woman, protect your Black woman, and like uplift your Black woman.
That's cool. Appreciate that. Josiah, man, any last words, any thoughts, or maybe answer a similar question is, as a young white male, what can we do to help you in this time that's helping the situation or whatever? I don't know. You tell me.
I mean, I think for me, is hold me accountable. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think there needs to be accountable, that it doesn't stop, that it continues, that it's not just a month-long frenzy of posting social media. It's like, am I following through? Am I having those conversations? Am I doing those things? And then also just, I think you can, it's up to you to change yourself. Like, well, theologically speaking, that's inaccurate.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is, it starts on an individual level. The change does. We're not going to end systematic oppression. But, whoever you are, whether you're a Christian or non-Christian, just listen. Just listen and like try to show compassion and realize that like you do have a sphere of influence. Right? We all have a sphere of influence, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's your basketball team, whether it's the people you play video games with, whatever it is. Like you do have an influence, and just don't forget to give people the grace that they need as well, because I think that's also something that you see a lot, is like the social media sniping of like, pew, 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 like you said this, you said that, you said that. Just chill out, and like, you don't have to be right. You don't have to be right all the time. And that's something that I have to preach to myself constantly, is I tend to get on my high horse. That's probably been evident at some point.
Yeah. But also being right, I think sometimes we need to learn to give you guys grace for trying. I know some people, that's not popular with a lot of people, even me saying that. Like when you say give people grace, I think, this whole like, sacrifice to silent people thing that was happening, especially the last couple of weeks. I'm kind of like, first couple of weeks, I'm like, I get it. I understand it. But like some people literally don't know what to say. So they're just sitting there and just like, oh, I don't know what to say. We got to give some grace in all of this. So yeah, man. So Micaela and Josiah, thank you guys so much for your time. Y'all hang on here. I'm going to end the live. Those who joined, I appreciate it. The conversation I see had a lot of spirit in it. Just reading through the comments and really appreciate these two young adults born in the 90s, giving us perspective that reflects me born in the 80s, some born in the 70s, some born in the 60s. How do we stop this from being people born in the 20s, 30s, and future 40s? All right, y'all. Love y'all. We out.